There's a physical location inside your brain where you stop being an observer and become the creator of reality. 2 Nobel-level scientists found it, and when doctors shut it down with anesthesia, you don't sleep, you vanish from existence. This isn't theory, it's measurable. And once you know where it is, you can control what you collapse into your life. Here's what they discovered. There's something doctors do to you in the operating room that nobody talks about. When they inject certain compounds into your bloodstream, you don't fall asleep. That's not what happens. You vanish, like someone flipped a switch and erased you from existence. This exposed something mind-bending. Your awareness doesn't come from your entire brain. It emerges from microscopic tubes resonating at quantum frequencies. And these frequencies aren't generated by you. They're tuned in, like a radio catching waves that were already there. You never had control over your consciousness. You just never learned how to retune it. You know that weird feeling right before anesthesia kicks in during surgery. It's not like drifting off to sleep naturally. It's completely different. You're there, aware, and then nothing. You simply vanish. No dreams, no thoughts, no time. Like you got deleted from the universe for a few hours. Anesthesiologists have always known how to do this to you, but they never fully understood what they were shutting down. Until 2 scientists, Penrose and Hameroff, found something inside your neurons that changed everything. Microscopic tubular structures vibrating at quantum frequencies. And when they tested how anesthetics work, they discovered these drugs go straight to those structures and shut down quantum coherence. Translation: they found your consciousness switch, the physical location where you stop being a passive observer and become someone who literally collapses possibilities into reality. Before I show you how this works, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because YouTube only delivers this type of content to people who actually show interest, and you're going to want the next ones. What they discovered inside your brain isn't just neuroscience, it's proof that you're a living quantum antenna. Let's start with the obvious thing nobody wants to admit. You already know that observing something at the quantum level changes that thing. Quantum physics made that clear. But knowing this and understanding where it happens inside you are 2 completely different things. Because the question that remains is, where exactly in your body does consciousness touch quantum reality? Where's the contact point between you and the field of possibilities? For decades, neuroscientists searched for this place. They mapped every brain region, measured electrical activity, tracked neurotransmitters, and found nothing that explained how consciousness emerges. Because they were looking in the wrong place. They were looking at scales that were too large, until Roger Penrose, the guy who won the Nobel Prize in Physics, had a disturbing intuition. Consciousness can't be the result of classical processes in the brain. It has to be something quantum, because only quantum processes can do what consciousness does: collapse superpositions, process information in non-computable ways, access states that should be separated in space-time. He joined forces with Stuart Hameroff, an anesthesiologist who spent his days shutting down people's consciousness. And together, they went looking for structures in the brain that were small enough to operate at the quantum level, but organized enough to process coherent information. And they found microtubules, These structures are hollow, microscopic tubes that form the internal skeleton of neurons. They're about 25 nanometers in diameter. To give you a sense of how small that is, if a microtubule were the size of a pencil, an entire neuron would be the size of a football field. At this scale, the laws of classical physics begin to dissolve, and quantum laws take control. What Penrose and Hameroff discovered is that these microtubules aren't just structure. They vibrate. They oscillate at specific frequencies. And when they do this in a coordinated way, they enter a state called quantum coherence. It's as if millions of these tiny tubes started vibrating in perfect synchrony, creating a unified quantum state. Think of an orchestra. Each instrument can play separate notes, but when they all play the same symphony in perfect harmony, something greater emerges. Something that doesn't exist in any individual instrument. The music itself. Your microtubules do this with quantum states. And from this quantum orchestration, something emerges that cannot be reduced to the parts. Your consciousness. Tesla talked about this without knowing he was talking about this. If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. He was describing exactly what happens in your microtubules. You're not a solid body processing chemical thoughts. You're a set of frequencies vibrating in coherence with the universal field. But here's where it gets really disturbing. Hameroff was obsessed with one question: how do anesthetics work? Because when you anesthetize someone, you're not just blocking pain, you're literally erasing consciousness. The person doesn't sleep. They cease to exist as a conscious observer. And when they return, there's no perceptible gap. It's as if those hours simply didn't happen for them. For years, nobody could explain why, until they started testing where anesthetics act at the molecular level. And they discovered something shocking. They bind directly to microtubules. They alter the quantum vibrations of these structures. And when they do this, quantum coherence collapses. And with it, consciousness disappears. Let that sink in for a moment. There's a measurable physical state in your brain that, when shut down, makes you cease to be. It's not metaphorical. It's not philosophical. It's literal. Your consciousness depends on quantum processes happening in microscopic structures inside your neurons. This means you're not the product of chemical reactions. You're the product of coherent quantum states. And quantum states aren't isolated. They entangle. They connect. They respond to fields of information. Your microtubules aren't creating thoughts out of nowhere. They're processing information that comes from somewhere. And that place isn't the brain. It's the field. Here's where the part that changes everything about how you understand reality comes in. What physics calls the vacuum of space isn't empty. This is one of the biggest illusions we carry. When you look at the night sky and see the darkness between the stars, it seems like there's nothing there, but quantum mechanics revealed something disturbing. The vacuum seethes with energy. It's called zero-point energy, and it's not a small amount of energy. Each cubic centimeter of empty space contains enough energy, theoretically, to boil all the oceans on Earth. That's not an exaggeration. It's what the equations of quantum physics show. But this energy isn't in the form of matter or light. It exists as quantum fluctuations, virtual particles appearing and disappearing. fields oscillating, information emerging and collapsing billions of times per second. And your microtubules are immersed in this ocean. Think of a radio antenna. It doesn't create radio waves. It tunes into frequencies that are already in the air. When you turn on the radio and hear music, that music isn't being generated inside the device. It was being broadcast all along. The antenna just captured, decoded, and transformed it into sound. Your microtubules do exactly this with the quantum field. They don't generate consciousness out of nothing. They tune into frequencies from an infinite ocean of information that permeates all of space, and translate these frequencies into conscious experience. When you have a thought, it's not your brain creating that thought in isolation. It's your brain tuning into a specific frequency in the field of possibilities. That's why Tesla was right. Everything is frequency. Everything is vibration. And you're a biological antenna designed to consciously tune into these vibrations. But here's the detail most people don't realize. Antennas can be tuned to different frequencies. Have you ever noticed how your emotional state completely changes the type of thought you can access? When you're in fear, anger, or desperation, certain thoughts simply don't appear. You can't think of solutions. You can't see possibilities. It's like your mind is stuck in a loop. And when you shift the state through a deep breath, music, a walk, a hug, suddenly different thoughts start emerging. Insights appear. Obvious solutions that you didn't see 5 minutes ago become crystal clear. This isn't positive psychology. It's quantum physics. Each emotional state is a vibration pattern in your microtubules, and each vibration pattern tunes into different frequencies in the information field. Fear tunes into one set of possibilities. Love tunes into another. Gratitude tunes into another. You're not attracting things when you change your vibration. You're literally changing the frequency your microtubules process. And with that, you access different information in the holographic field of possibilities. Manifestation isn't magic, it's conscious tuning of quantum frequencies through elevated emotional states that alter the coherence of your microtubules. Drop a comment below. Have you noticed how changing your internal state suddenly made you see solutions you didn't see before? Share your experience, because what comes next will show you why this isn't just about thoughts. It's about the fundamental structure of the reality you inhabit. Modern physics discovered something that sounds like science fiction, but is pure mathematics. The entire three-dimensional universe you experience may be a holographic projection of information encoded on a two-dimensional surface. This is called the holographic principle. And it's not speculation. It's one of the most rigorous theories in theoretical physics, developed to solve the black hole information paradox. But what does this mean in practice? Take a common hologram like those on credit cards. When you look from one angle, you see a three-dimensional image. But if you cut the hologram in half, you don't see half the image. You see the entire image, just with less resolution. Because all the information of the image is distributed in each part of the hologram. The universe works like this. All the information in the cosmos isn't distributed in three-dimensional space. It's encoded at every point in space as holographic information. And when you observe something, what's really happening is your microtubules are decoding holographic information and projecting that information as three-dimensional experience. You're not inside an external reality. You're processing internal information and projecting it as world experience. This explains something that was always mysterious in Hermetic traditions. The all is in everything, and everything is in the all. It wasn't mystical poetry. It was a literal description of how a holographic universe works. Each part contains information about the whole, and your microtubules, as quantum antennas, have potential access to all this information. Not just information about your body, your life, your past, all information. Because in a hologram, everything is connected to everything. This is where intuition, synchronicity, and premonition stop being mystical and become non-linear accesses to holographic information. When you have a strong intuition about something you shouldn't know, it's not your sixth sense picking up mystical vibrations. It's your microtubules accessing information that's encoded in the holographic field, but that your brain normally filters out because it's not local in conventional space-time. When you think of someone and that person calls you seconds later, it's not coincidence. It's quantum coherence between two sets of microtubules tuned to the same frequency in the field, accessing the same holographic information at the same moment. The universe isn't made of separate objects in space. It's made of information entangled in a cosmic hologram. And you're not an object inside this hologram. You're a conscious decoding point of information. This completely changes what it means to change your reality. You're not trying to manipulate external objects. You're trying to tune into different frequencies of holographic information. And the way to do this isn't through mental effort. It's through quantum coherence. When your microtubules enter states of high coherence through deep meditation, flow states, elevated emotions like love and gratitude, they become more sensitive to subtle frequencies of the holographic field. Frequencies that contain information about possibilities that haven't yet collapsed in your current timeline. That's why meditation isn't relaxation, it's antenna fine-tuning. That's why visualization isn't positive thinking, it's pre-tuning of holographic information. That's why elevated emotions aren't just good mood, they're quantum states that alter the frequency you decode. Neville Goddard intuited this when he said you need to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. He didn't know about microtubules or quantum holograms, but he knew that changing the internal state changes external reality, because there's no real separation between internal and external. Everything is information being decoded. And when you tune into the frequency of a reality where your desire is already manifested, your microtubules start processing information from that timeline. And the more you maintain this coherence, the more holographic information collapses into three-dimensional experience. You're not creating something from nothing. You're tuning into something that already exists as a possibility in the holographic field and bringing that possibility to collapse through your sustained conscious observation. But there's a crucial detail most people get wrong. You don't tune in with the thinking mind. You tune in with coherent quantum state. And quantum state isn't controlled by thought. It's influenced by emotion, intention, and sustained attention. That's why you can think positive all day and nothing changes. Because thought without emotional coherence doesn't alter the frequency of microtubules. It's like trying to tune a radio station by changing only the volume, but not the frequency. The frequency changes when you feel, when you embody, when you enter a state where the separation between you and what you desire disappears, where there's no longer me wanting that. There's only consciousness experiencing a specific configuration of information. This isn't easy because your brain is conditioned to process reality based on past patterns. Your microtubules already have habitual frequencies, and breaking out of these frequencies requires energy, intention, and sustained practice. But it's possible because you're not a prisoner of the current frequency. You're the antenna, and antennas can be retuned. Now let's go to where this really gets disturbing. Because if you're an antenna processing information from a holographic field, the question that arises is, where does this field come from? What's the original source of information? Quantum cosmology found an answer that destroys everything you learned about the origin of the universe. For decades, the official story was, the universe began 13.8 billion years ago in an event called the Big Bang. All matter, energy, space, and time emerged from an infinitely dense and hot singularity. Before that, there was no before. Time itself started there, except this story has a giant mathematical problem. Singularities are points where the equations of physics break down, where all values go to infinity and nothing makes sense anymore. It's like dividing by zero. The math simply doesn't work. So physicists working with loop quantum gravity went to investigate what happens when you apply quantum mechanics to the origin of the universe. And they discovered something shocking. The Big Bang singularity doesn't exist. In its place, there's something called the Big Bounce, a quantum leap. What they discovered is that when the universe contracts to a critical point, repulsive quantum forces become dominant and make the universe rebound like a bouncing ball. A contracting universe reaches a quantum limit and then explodes in a new expansion. This means our universe didn't begin. It transitioned from a previous state. And if this happened once, it probably happened infinite times. The universe breathes. It contracts and expands in eternal cycles. There's no absolute beginning. There's no absolute end. There's only perpetual transformation of states. Tesla was right again when he talked about vibrations. The entire universe is a cosmic vibration, oscillating between contraction and expansion, systole and diastole, inhalation and exhalation, and you're synchronized with this breathing. When you meditate and focus on breathing, you're not just oxygenating the body, you're aligning with the fundamental rhythm of the cosmos. Because breathing isn't just biological, it's quantum. It's the way consciousness oscillates between states of collapse and superposition. But here's the detail that changes everything. If the universe didn't start from a singularity, then consciousness also didn't arise at some point in evolution. It's not a product of matter organizing itself. It's the opposite. Matter emerges from states of consciousness collapsing in the quantum field. This completely inverts the relationship between consciousness and physical reality. You're not a body that developed consciousness. You're consciousness that's projecting the experience of having a body. The universe didn't create observers. Observers are creating the universe through the act of observation. And this isn't philosophy. It's a direct consequence of what quantum physics demonstrates and what quantum cosmology reveals. If the universe is an eternal oscillation between states, and consciousness is what collapses these states into defined reality, then consciousness can't be a product of the universe. It must be the precondition for the universe to exist as something defined. You're not in the universe. The universe is in you. Or better, there's no real separation between you and universe. There's only a field of information observing itself through infinite, temporary focal points. This explains why the anthropic principle bothers materialist scientists so much. The physical constants of the universe are tuned with absurd precision to allow conscious life. If gravitational force were 1/1,000,000,000% different, stars wouldn't form. If the strong nuclear force were slightly different, atoms wouldn't exist. The probability of these constants being perfectly tuned by chance is so small it has no name. It's like throwing 1,000 dice simultaneously and all landing on 6, multiple times in a row. This suggests the universe isn't tuned to produce consciousness. The universe is manifestation of consciousness, self-organizing into patterns that allow self-observation. You're not a cosmic accident. You're embodied cosmic intentionality, a point through which the universal field knows itself. And here comes something that will seem impossible until you understand the physics behind it. You can't really die. There's a famous paradox in physics called the black hole information paradox. When something falls into a black hole, all information about it should disappear. But quantum mechanics has an iron law. Information cannot be destroyed. Stephen Hawking spent decades trying to solve this, and the final conclusion of theoretical physics is information is truly indestructible. It can be transformed, encoded, scattered, but never annihilated. If you're fundamentally information being processed by quantum antennas, then the information that constitutes your essence cannot be destroyed. When the body collapses, when microtubules stop vibrating, information doesn't disappear. It just changes configuration. Physical death isn't extinction, it's frequency shift. Think of a radio signal. When you turn off the radio, the music doesn't cease to exist. It continues to be broadcast. You just stopped tuning in. Similarly, when the body dies, consciousness doesn't cease to exist. It just stops being tuned through that specific set of microtubules. But the information you are remains encoded in the holographic field. This has an even more radical implication. If all information is preserved in the cosmic hologram, then all versions of you, past, present, future, possible, exist simultaneously as accessible information. What you call me is just a specific configuration of information being decoded in this moment, but other configurations, other timelines, other possibilities exist in superposition in the field. When you drastically change your vibration, when you profoundly alter your quantum patterns, you're not transforming yourself. You're changing which version of you is being decoded. Manifestation isn't creating something new. It's tuning into a version of reality where that already exists. And all these versions exist simultaneously in the multiverse of quantum possibilities. Each decision you make, each emotional state you sustain, each frequency you tune into is determining which timeline collapses as your experience. You're not stuck in a linear timeline. You're navigating an ocean of parallel possibilities, and your consciousness is what determines which possibility collapses as real for you. This means the version of you that already manifested what you desire exists now, not in the future. It exists as a possibility in the holographic field. And the only thing separating you from that version is the frequency your microtubules are processing in this moment. When Neville Goddard said to live in the end, he was describing quantum tuning of parallel timelines. When you assume the feeling of having already accomplished something, you're not pretending. You're tuning into the frequency of the timeline where that already happened. And the more you sustain this tuning, the more information from that timeline begins to collapse in your three-dimensional experience. But there's an obstacle that prevents most people from making this work: decoherence. Your microtubules don't maintain quantum coherence for very long when you're in survival states. Fear, anxiety, stress, anger, all these states create chaotic patterns that break coherence. It's like trying to tune a radio station while someone shakes the antenna. The signal becomes unstable, full of noise, impossible to maintain. That's why you can't manifest through desperation. Desperation is total decoherence. Your microtubules are vibrating in chaotic survival patterns, tuning into frequencies of scarcity, danger, and limitation. Manifestation requires the opposite: elevated coherence, states where your microtubules enter harmonic synchronization. And the states that generate greatest coherence are love, gratitude, reverence, compassion, joy. It's no coincidence that all spiritual traditions emphasize these states. They're not abstract moral virtues. They're quantum frequencies that create coherence in your biological information processors. When you feel genuine gratitude, your microtubules enter a state of coherence that makes them sensitive to more subtle and elevated frequencies of the holographic field, frequencies where possibilities you desire already exist. Visualization only works when accompanied by emotional coherence. If you visualize something while feeling lack, fear, or doubt, you're sending contradictory signals. Your microtubules keep tuning and detuning rapidly, creating destructive interference. But when you visualize something while feeling the ecstasy of already having, the peace of already being, the gratitude of already living that, you create sustained coherence. And sustained coherence collapses information. Here's the practice that changes everything. You need to find the emotional frequency of the fulfilled desire if we're seeing any external evidence. You need to tune into holographic information before it collapses into physical form. This seems impossible to the logical mind. How can I feel gratitude for something I don't have? How can I feel peace about something that hasn't happened yet? But this is exactly the ability you need to develop. Feeling independent of external circumstance. Because external circumstance is the result of internal frequency, not the cause. Deep meditation trains this. When you meditate, you learn to generate internal states without depending on external stimuli. You learn to tune into frequencies by conscious choice, not by automatic reaction. And the more you practice this, the more your microtubules become responsive to your intention. They begin to maintain coherence for longer periods. And prolonged coherence is what allows accessing and collapsing information from non-local timelines. You're not learning manifestation techniques. You're training your quantum antennas to operate at frequencies most people never access because they're stuck in survival patterns. And when you finally manage to maintain elevated coherence long enough, something shifts. Not gradually, almost instantly, like you changed channels. Because you did change channels. You collapsed a different timeline. But there's something most people don't understand about tuning frequencies, and this stops them from sustaining coherence long enough to collapse what they desire. Because understanding you're a quantum antenna is one thing. Completely different is shutting down the automatic patterns that have kept you locked in the same frequencies for years. And there's a specific mechanism in the brain that sabotages every attempt at conscious tuning if you don't know how to neutralize it. I'll talk about this in the next video that's going to appear on your screen. Because when you understand how this mechanism works, you'll realize why so many people give up before seeing results. Now, if you made it this far, comment "antenna activated." I want to see how many actually watched to the end. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, subscribe now. Turn on notifications too, because YouTube only delivers this type of content to people who show real interest. Click on the next video that's going to appear on the screen. It's going to show you what's missing for you to maintain conscious tuning without being pulled back to old patterns. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.